Elodie stole my gloves on the coldest morning of the residency, and I hated that my first instinct was not to snatch them back, but to remember the last time her fingers had been inside mine. We were standing behind the north studio before sunrise, where the stone steps still carried a skin of frost, and the old brass door refused to open, unless someone lifted the handle and kicked low at the same time. I'd been trying to do both while balancing a roll of drafted patterns under one arm. My gloves were plain charcoal wool, the kind that stretched thin at the fingertips, and never looked elegant no matter how carefully I paired them with my coat. Elodie wore a cream scarf, black boots, and the kind of composed expression that made even being early look deliberate. She took the patterns from me without asking, tucked them safely beneath her arm, and then slid the gloves straight out of my coat pocket. "Ellie," I said, low enough that the other residents gathering by the gate would not hear the nickname. Her mouth curved as if I had given her exactly what she wanted. "Come get them if you want them back." The words were playful. The smirk was familiar. The danger was that everything familiar between us had started happening in places where no one could see. 3 nights earlier, she had stood barefoot in my kitchen, wearing my old cardigan and pretending to study the steam from my kettle while she told me she had never felt peaceful anywhere except beside me. 2 nights earlier, she had fallen asleep against my shoulder during a film neither of us had watched, her hand tucked beneath the cuff of my sleeve like she had been cold only in the places I could warm. And the night before, when I had asked whether anyone at Bellamy House knew we spent most evenings together, she had kissed the inside of my wrist and whispered, "Soon." Now she held my gloves behind her back while the rest of the studio courtyard filled with people who knew her as the darling of the winter program, the woman whose critiques drew a crowd, whose laughter could turn a room toward her, whose family name sat on a plaque beside the main gallery. I was supposed to be her best friend. That was the label everyone understood. It was safe, sweet, unthreatening, and elastic enough to cover late-night walks, shared cabs, private jokes, and the way she sometimes looked at me when she thought no one else noticed. I stepped toward her. "We are going to be late." "We are never late," she said. "We arrive when the room has earned us." I wanted to laugh because she was ridiculous. I wanted to touch her because the collar of her coat had folded in, and no one else knew how often I fixed small things on her before the world got to admire the final version. I wanted, more than anything, for her to let me have one ordinary public moment, a teasing tug of war over gloves, a smile she did not hide, my name said, with the softness she used when we were alone. A pair of residents rounded the corner, talking loudly about the visiting curator's schedule. Elodie's hand moved at once. She tucked my gloves into her own pocket, stepped neatly away, and lifted her chin into the cool, bright mask everyone recognized. "Morning, Elodie," one of them called. "We saved you a seat inside." "Perfect," Elodie said. Her voice had sharpened into its public shape. "I'll be right there." The resident glanced at me as if trying to place me. "Rowan, right?" I nodded. "Right." Elodie did not correct the casual tone. She did not say, "This is Rowan, my best friend." She did not say, "She helped me rebuild my entire installation last night after I broke the hinge." She did not say, "I stole her gloves because I wanted her to chase me." She only smiled at the others and walked with them toward the door, my gloves still hidden in her pocket. For a few seconds I stood on the frost-slick stone with my bare fingers curled around nothing. Then I lifted the handle, kicked the door open myself, and followed everyone inside. Bellamy House had once belonged to a shipping family that collected art more aggressively than they collected manners. Now it served as a winter residency for designers, conservators, and artists with enough talent or connections to survive 6 weeks under the eye of donors who liked discovering people before they became expensive. I was there on scholarship, working on adaptive garments for dancers with joint injuries. Elodie Calder was there because she had won every award she touched, and because her mother chaired half the city's cultural boards. We had met in the first week over jammed industrial iron, and somehow become inseparable, before either of us had admitted that inseparable was a dangerous word. She had been easy to dislike at first, too poised, too amused, too good at entering any room and making it rearrange around her. During critiques, she asked questions that sounded gentle until they found the weakest seam in someone's work. She never raised her voice because she had never needed to. People leaned toward her. People repeat her opinions in their own words. People wanted her approval and resented wanting it. I had not wanted it. That had been my first mistake. When she came to my station on the 7th night of the residency, after everyone else had left for the pub, I thought she had arrived to dissect my prototype. I was pinning stretch panels onto a practice bodice, half frozen because the West studio heating worked only when threatened. She watched me for a full minute, then said, "You swear at fabric like it personally disappointed you." It did. I like that. I'm not doing it for your entertainment. No, she had said, reaching for a loose pin before it fell from the table. That's why it's entertaining. I should have sent her away. Instead, I let her sit on the stool beside me. She asked about the dancers, not the awards. She noticed that I placed magnets along seams for people with reduced hand strength. She asked whether beauty had to be earned through discomfort, and when I snapped, "Only if the designer is lazy," she smiled like I had handed her a secret. After that, she appeared everywhere. Beside me in the archive, carrying 2 coffees and pretending she had bought the second by accident. At the laundrette down the hill when snow trapped the residency vans, and we had to wash muslin by hand. In the empty lecture hall, where she listened while I practiced a presentation, and admitted she hated speaking in front of her mother more than she hated anything else. By the 4th week, she knew my tea order, the exact pressure I liked when she massaged stiffness out of my thumb, and the fact that I always kept gloves in my right pocket because my left pocket had a torn lining. By the 5th, I knew that she called her father only on speaker because his silence frightened her more than his criticism, that she had wanted to study choreography before her mother redirected her toward textile architecture, and that she hid softness the way other people hid bruises. The first time she kissed me, we were under the freight stairwell after a donor preview. She had taken my hand because I had been shaking with relief after a critic praised my work, and she had pressed her mouth to my knuckles, as if it were the most natural answer to my fear. I had said her name, not as warning, not as permission, but as both. She looked at me for one clean, unguarded second, then kissed me properly, slow and terrified, and careful enough to ruin every excuse I had left. Afterward, she leaned her forehead against mine and said, "I don't know how to do this where people can see." I said, "Then we learn." She said, "Give me time." So I gave her time. I gave her mornings where she arrived with everyone else and greeted me with bright casualness, evenings where she texted a single snowflake and appeared at my door 10 minutes later, afternoons where her shoulder brushed mine at shared tables, and she moved away before anyone could wonder. I gave her the dignity of fear, because I knew what fear felt like. I had spent my first year after coming out, watching people decide which version of me was easiest to accept. I had thought patience was kindness. I had not yet understood that patience could become a room I locked myself inside. That morning, the visiting curator from the Marwick Museum arrived with silver hair, red glasses, and the cheerful brutality of a person whose approval could change careers. Residents crowded the critique room in careful outfits, all pretending not to care where they sat. I found a place near the back, flexing my cold fingers under the table. Elodie sat in the front row between Tessa Blythe and June Armand, both daughters of families who funded galleries for sport. My gloves appeared once from Elodie's pocket when she crossed her legs. She pressed them under her notebook before anyone could see. I told myself not to care. It was a stupid pair of gloves. It was a stupid joke. It was not the same as being hidden. Then Marwick asked us to pair up for a rapid installation challenge. "Someone whose instincts unsettle yours," she said. "Not your friend, not your usual safety blanket." People moved fast. Chairs scraped. Names crossed the room. I rose, turning instinctively toward Elodie before I could stop myself. She saw me. That was important. She saw me start toward her with my bare hands and our last month between us. She saw the question on my face, the small public risk I had finally decided to take. Tessa caught Elodie's arm. "You're with me, obviously." Elodie's gaze flicked from Tessa to me, then away. "Obviously." I stopped between 2 rows of chairs. "Elodie," I said softly at first, then louder because the room was too noisy. "We said we'd try the kinetic brace idea together if this came up." Tessa looked at me with bright curiosity. "Did you?" Elodie smiled politely. Not warmly, not privately. Politely, as if I had confused her with someone else. "I think you must be mistaken," she said. The sentence did not sound cruel. That made it worse. It was smooth and mild and perfectly placed. A tiny blade hidden in linen. A few people turned. Someone gave an awkward little laugh. Not because anything was funny, but because discomfort always looked for an exit. My face stayed still. I know it did, because I felt myself leave it. "I must be," I said. Elodie's fingers tightened around her pencil. For half a second, her public mask cracked enough that I saw panic beneath it. But panic did not bring my name back to her mouth. She turned toward Tessa. Their chairs shifted together. I did not make a scene. I did not ask if she had mistaken me last night, when she fell asleep in my sweater. I did not ask whether the gloves in her pocket belonged to a stranger. I walked to the supply table, chose a box of brass fasteners with care, and accepted a partnership with Miko Tan, who specialized in paper sculpture, and had the decency not to ask why everyone had gone quiet around me. For 90 minutes, I built a flexible shoulder harness with a person who barely knew me, while the woman who knew how I took my tea laughed 3 tables away. When the session ended, Elodie crossed the room as if pulled by something stronger than pride. I was packing blades into their sleeves, each movement precise, because precision was the only thing I trusted not to betray me. "Rowan," she said under her breath. I closed the supply box. "Careful. Someone might think you know me." Her mouth parted, then closed. I panicked. "Yes." Tessa was right there. "Yes. My mother knows her mother." That made me look up. "Thank you for explaining the hierarchy. I had missed my place in it." Color rose under her skin. "That's not what I meant. It rarely is." She reached into her pocket and took out my gloves. They had warmed there, held against her all morning. The sight of them hurt in a way I had not expected. She placed them on the table between us, not quite touching my hand. "I'm sorry," she said. I stared at the gloves. "I know. I'll make it right. Not today." "Rowan." "I have to work." Miko called from the doorway, asking whether I had the brass washers. I lifted the box. "Coming." I left Elodie standing beside the table, with her apology still unfinished and my gloves lying between us like something small that had survived a fire. For the rest of the day, I became efficient in a way that frightened even me. I answered Marwick's questions. I adjusted a model's sleeve. I ate half a sandwich without tasting it. When Elodie texted, I muted the thread before the preview could finish forming on my screen. At 6, I returned to my assigned room in the East Wing and found a paper bag hanging from my doorknob. Inside were hand warmers, ginger tea, and a new pair of gloves, dark green leather lined with cashmere. There was no note. She did not need one. The gesture was so exactly her that it almost undid me. Expensive where my own had been practical, thoughtful where her words had failed, cowardly because a gift required no witnesses. I left the bag on the small desk and wore my old wool gloves to dinner. Bellamy dinners were served in a glass-roofed hall, where the long tables made everyone feel like they were either in a boarding school or a painting of a trial. I usually sat with Elodie unless she had been absorbed by donors or admirers. That night I chose a seat beside Miko, and across from Hana, a lighting designer whose work made shadows look intentional. Hana had silver rings on 3 fingers, a laugh that arrived without permission, and a habit of listening as if she expected people to surprise her. "You look like you've decided to outlive someone," she said as I sat. "Several people, ideally." "Excellent. Ambition suits you." Miko nearly choked on soup. I smiled because Hana's timing gave me a place to put my anger that did not involve breaking. Across the hall, Elodie watched me from the center of her usual constellation. Tessa leaned close to show her something on a phone. June touched Elodie's sleeve. Elodie nodded at whatever they said, but her attention kept catching on me. Once her hand moved toward her pocket, then stopped. Maybe she had forgotten she no longer had my gloves. Hana followed my glance and did not pretend she had missed anything. Complicated? No. That was unconvincing. "I'm practicing." "Then keep going. You may reach mysterious by dessert." Hana did not ask more. That restraint mattered. It let me stay. The next few days changed the shape of my life in small, hard ways. I stopped waiting outside rooms for Elodie to finish conversations. I stopped saving her the corner seat near the radiator. I stopped answering texts after midnight. When she came to my studio table, I was civil. When she asked whether we could talk, I said, "Not here," and kept cutting fabric. When she appeared in the archive aisle, where we had once hidden from a snowstorm, and whispered, "Please," I said, "you already taught me what here means," and returned to photographing closures for my research board. I expected distance to make me hollow. Instead, it made space. Into that space came other people, not as replacements, but as evidence that I'd been living too narrowly. Miko asked me to consult on a paper lantern harness for a mobility performance. Hana invited me to help test light-reactive thread in the black box studio. Dr. Sayegh, the residency mentor who had always treated praise like a controlled substance, told me my work had an argument sharp enough to survive a bad room. I carried that sentence around for 2 days like a coin in my pocket. Elodie did not repeat the denial. She did not publicly insult me. She did something harder to forgive. She became careful. Too careful. In rooms with others, she addressed me only when necessary, and with professional distance, as if respect could substitute for courage. Alone, when she managed to catch me, her voice changed back. "You're freezing me out," she said one evening beside the dye sinks, where indigo stained the porcelain like old storms. I rinsed a strip of fabric until the water ran pale. "I'm matching the temperature." "That's not fair." "No, it's accurate." Her jaw worked. She looked tired, not dramatically, not beautifully, just like someone who had slept badly and hated being seen in the middle of it. I made one mistake. I turned off the tap. "You made one choice in front of people. It revealed 100 choices you'd been making quietly." She flinched. I did not apologize for the precision. "I was scared," she said. "I know. That used to be enough for me." "What is enough now?" I folded the wet fabric over a rack and reached for a towel. "I don't know yet. That's why I need you to stop trying to rush me into forgiving you." "I'm not trying to rush you. You keep appearing wherever I am. I miss you." The words landed too softly. For one dangerous second, the room returned to the shape it used to have. Elodie standing close, sleeves rolled, eyes unguarded, me pretending that wanting her did not rearrange my judgment. Then I looked at the open door behind her and the hallway beyond it. "You miss access," I said. Her face changed. "That's cruel." "It might be. It's also possible that missing me and missing the version of me who waited patiently feel similar to you." She had no answer ready. Public Elodie always did. Private Elodie often did not. That difference had once made me feel chosen. Now it made me wonder how much of her softness depended on no one else being present. I left before she could find a sentence polished enough to stop me. The lunch invitation happened a week after the critique, on a day when snow pressed against the windows but refused to fall. The residency kitchen had become loud from weather frustration. Everyone wanted the same corner outlets, the same kettle, the same chance to complain about being trapped in a mansion with people they secretly wanted to impress. I was sitting with Hana and Miko near the tall windows, eating noodles from a chipped bowl while Hana described a theater director who believed darkness could be too democratic. "He sounds unbearable," I said. "He wore fingerless gloves indoors and called everyone by their full name." "Of course he was unbearable," Miko pointed with chopsticks. "You also wear fingerless gloves indoors." "I wear them for wiring," Hana said. "He wore them for despair." I laughed. It startled me a little. Not because laughter had become rare, but because this one had come without checking who might hear it. Elodie sat 2 tables away with Tessa, June, and a visiting writer named Clara, who had decided Elodie was the most interesting person in the house. Elodie had been quiet through most of lunch. I knew because I was trying not to know. Hana leaned back in her chair and studied me with theatrical seriousness. "Rowan, I'm going to ask you something, and you're allowed to say no without making it weird." Miko's eyes moved from Hana to me with immediate fascination. I set down my chopsticks. "That is a suspicious opening." "It's a merciful one." Hana spun one of her rings. "There's a small exhibition in Briar Lane on Saturday. Obnoxious sculptures, decent wine, Lighting I will complain about. I'd like to take you. As in take me because you need someone to validate your complaints? As in, I like your mind, your face, and the way you insult bad design under your breath. A date if you want one, a field trip if you don't. The room did not go silent. Real life rarely served drama that neatly. Someone dropped a spoon. The kettle clicked. Miko stared into her noodles, as if pretending not to listen had become a spiritual practice. But I felt the air change at the table behind Hana's shoulder. Elodie had stopped moving. My first instinct was absurd guilt, as if being asked out in a public room were something I had done at her. Then Hana smiled, not pressing, not performing, and I remembered that I was allowed to receive interest without turning it into a weapon or an apology. I don't know if I'm ready for a date, I said honestly. Hana nodded once. Good answer. It was? It was yours. That tends to help. I looked down at my bowl, then back at her. But I'd like to go. If we start with field trip and see what it feels like. Her smile widened, warm but not triumphant. Field trip with romantic potential. Very respectable. I'll send details. Miko muttered, I am in the presence of adults. Horrifying. I laughed again. And this time Elodie stood up. Her chair scraped hard enough that several people turned. Tessa said something I could not hear. Elodie did not answer. She crossed the kitchen with a measured pace that failed because her hands were not measured. They were clenched at her sides. Hana, she said. Hana turned, eyebrows lifting. Elodie. I need to speak with Rowan. Every table within 10 feet became more interested in soup than anyone had ever been. My skin prickled with attention. I said, I'm eating. It's important. Hana's expression lost its humor. She said she's eating. Elodie looked at her then, really looked, and jealousy showed itself not as rage but as disbelief, as if the world had violated an arrangement no one else had agreed to. This doesn't concern you. It concerns the person I was speaking to. Elodie, I said quietly. The sound of her name from me in public made something flicker across her face. Hope, maybe. Or panic wearing Hope's coat. She turned back. Please. It was the please that undid the room. Not because it was loud, but because Elodie Calder did not plead in kitchens. Tessa was staring now. June's mouth had parted. Clara looked delighted in the awful way writers sometimes did when humans made material of themselves. I stood slowly, taking my bowl to the counter because I needed one mundane action between impulse and decision. We can talk in the corridor. Hana did not touch me, did not claim me, did not make the moment hers. She only said, You don't owe anyone speed. I nodded because I needed to hear it. In the corridor outside the kitchen, the old radiators clanged like they were objecting on my behalf. Elodie walked 10 steps ahead, then stopped near a cabinet of chipped serving plates. The moment we were out of direct view, her composure cracked. Are you going out with her? That was what she asked. And you said yes. I said I'd go to the exhibition. Rowan. There it was again, that private version of my name. I leaned back against the wall, suddenly tired. You didn't want people to know me until someone else did. That's not true. No? I asked. Because 2 weeks ago, knowing me was a mistake in a critique room. Today, when Hana asks me out, you suddenly need to speak with me so badly that half the kitchen now knows something is wrong. She rubbed both hands over her face, ruining the smoothness she had carried all morning. I handled it badly. You handled it honestly. Her eyes lifted. What does that mean? It means you showed me what you wanted. You wanted me available to you, but not visible. You wanted the parts of me that came to your room at night, but not the version who could embarrass you in front of Tessa. She doesn't matter. Then why did she matter more than I did? Elodie took that like a physical blow, but this time she did not deny it quickly. She looked toward the kitchen door, where voices murmured beyond the wood. For once, the public world was close enough to hear us, and she had no elegant way to pretend otherwise. My mother invited Tessa's family to the final showcase, she said. There's a fellowship attached to their foundation. I knew if they started talking, it would get back to her before I had figured out what to say. And I became the thing you had not figured out. No, you became the thing I cared about most, and I was terrified I'd lose control of the story. I laughed once without humor. I'm not a story. I know. I don't think you do. She stepped closer, then stopped before the movement became assumption. That small restraint hurt more than if she had reached for me. It meant she was learning while I was still angry. What do you want from me? She asked. The answer had once been simple. Choose me. Now it had grown teeth and roots. I want you to stop acting like jealousy is bravery. I want you to decide what kind of person you are when people are watching. And I want time to decide whether I still want to be close enough to get hurt by the answer. Her eyes shone. She looked away before tears could become visible. Are you going to date her? I'm going to an exhibition with her. Do you like her? Yes. I did not soften it. Hana deserved that much. So did I. I liked that she asked questions without making me feel responsible for her fear. Elodie swallowed. That was fair. It wasn't meant to be fair. It was meant to be true. We returned separately. I finished lunch with Hana and Miko, while my body remembered how to sit beneath attention. Elodie did not come back to the kitchen. Later, rumors moved through Bellamy House with the discretion of spilled ink. By evening, I had been asked whether Elodie and I were fighting, whether Hana and I were together, and whether Tessa had actually called me that scholarship girl in the east stairwell. The answers were yes, no, and apparently, though no one was brave enough to repeat it where I could hear. That night, I found Elodie waiting outside my studio table, not hidden in a hallway or tucked into my doorway, but standing in the main workroom while 6 other residents adjusted models and argued over glue. She held my old charcoal gloves. I repaired the left seam, she said when I approached. Her voice carried, not loudly, but enough. You said the lining caught on your ring. I looked around despite myself. People were pretending not to watch. You could have left them at my door. I know. The old pattern waited between us. A private gesture seeking public forgiveness without naming the wound. I did not take the gloves. Elodie looked down at them. I wanted everyone to see me give them back. That isn't the same as telling the truth. No, she said, and her face colored. It's what I can do today without making it about a performance. I studied her. What truth do you think you owe? Her fingers tightened around the mended wool. That I know you. That you matter to me. That I lied when I acted otherwise. A glue bottle stopped squeaking somewhere behind us. The room had become very interested in our quiet conversation. And why did you lie? I asked. Elodie lifted her eyes to mine. She hated this. I could see it. Not because she hated me asking, but because public vulnerability sat on her like an unfamiliar coat. Because I was afraid of what people would do with the truth, she said. And because I cared more about controlling that fear than about what my silence did to you. I took the gloves then. They were warm from her hands. I did not forgive her in that moment, but I accepted the first honest object she had offered me. Thank you, I said. She nodded. I'll leave you to work. It was the leaving that made me believe the apology more than the speech. She did not wait for reward. She did not ask to come by later. She walked back to her table, where Tessa stared at her as if Elodie had removed a mask and revealed a person inconveniently human beneath it. Saturday arrived with a sky the color of unwashed wool. I almost canceled on Hana 3 times, not because I did not want to go, but because wanting anything uncomplicated felt suspicious. Hana met me outside Briar Lane wearing a rust-colored coat and a hat with a crooked brim. She handed me a paper cup. Spiced cider, she said. If you hate it, lie kindly. I'm bad at that. I know. It's part of your charm. The exhibition was indeed full of obnoxious sculptures. One looked like a ladder arguing with a birdcage. Hana hated the lighting in 4 separate rooms and adored one tiny installation made of thread and shadow. She did not flirt constantly. She let the evening breathe. She asked about my adaptive garments, about how my work had changed since arriving at Bellamy, about whether ambition frightened me. Only when it starts sounding like someone else's voice, I said. She leaned against a white wall beneath a sculpture that resembled a silver rib. That's a good answer. You say that whenever I say something inconvenient. I enjoy accuracy. Halfway through the night, she asked about Elodie. Not prying, not coy, just direct enough to respect all three of us. Is she an ex? Hana asked. I considered lying, but Hana had not earned dishonesty. Not exactly. That sounds worse. It is less tidy. Do you love her? The question did not arrive like an accusation. It arrived like a door opened carefully. I looked at the thread installation until the shadows blurred. Yes, I said. But I'm trying to find out whether loving her is enough reason to keep letting her near me. Hana nodded. That's the part people skip. What part? The near. Everyone talks about love like it's the whole architecture. It isn't. It's just the weather. The building is trust, timing, effort, courage, all the unromantic beams. I smiled faintly. You really are a lighting designer. Even your metaphors need structures. She laughed. Guilty. Outside after the exhibition, snow finally began falling in thin diagonal lines. Hana walked me to the corner where the residency car would collect me. She did not kiss me. She did not look disappointed when I did not invite it. I like you, she said, and I'm not volunteering to be anyone's lesson. I don't want you to be. Good. Then here is my very grown-up proposal. We can keep being friends with romantic potential, or we can remove the romantic part and I will still complain about lighting with you. I felt a tenderness toward her that was not the same as wanting. It was cleaner in some ways, and because of that, I refused to muddy it. I think I need the second one, I said. Her mouth tilted. Unfortunate for my ego. Healthy for my evening. I'm sorry. Don't be. You were honest before I got foolish. That is rarer than it should be. She adjusted my scarf with friendly briskness, then tapped one of my repaired gloves. Whoever fixed those did a careful job. She can be careful. Then make sure she can be brave too. The car arrived. I watched Hana walk away beneath a street lamp, her crooked hat catching snow, and felt something settle in me. Not victory, not closure. A kind of alignment. I had chosen not to use her attention as proof of my worth. I had chosen not to punish Elodie with a date I did not fully want. I had chosen myself, which sounded inspirational, only if one ignored how frightening it felt in practice. Back at Bellamy House, the main hall was lit for a donor reception I had forgotten to dread. Music floated through the doors. People in dark clothes carried champagne, and the portraits of dead shipping men looked unimpressed by all of us. I tried to slip upstairs, but Dr. Sayegh intercepted me near the staircase. Rowan. Good. Marwick wants another look at your brace system. Now? Opportunity rarely checks whether you're tired. I glanced down at my snow-damp coat. I look like I fought the weather and lost. You look like an artist. Donors love evidence of suffering. She guided me toward the gallery before I could argue. My prototypes had been moved to the central display without warning. Under proper lighting, they looked both familiar and startlingly complete. Garments shaped for movement rather than display alone. Seams that opened kindly, fastenings designed for dignity instead of assistance. Marwick stood beside them with 3 trustees, including a tall woman I recognized from photographs as Elodie's mother. Elodie Calder had Elodie's cheekbones, and none of her warmth. She wore winter white, and the expression of someone permanently disappointed by the room's acoustics. Marwick introduced me. I spoke about dancers, pain, access, beauty. I forgot to be small. I forgot to apologize for taking time. The trustees asked questions. I answered the ones they meant, and gently corrected the ones they phrased badly. Dr. Sayegh's eyebrow rose once, which from her was a standing ovation. Then Elodie Calder said, My daughter mentioned you were close. The pause before close held history, suspicion, and warning. I looked at her, then at Elodie across the gallery. Elodie had just entered with Tessa and June. She heard. Everyone close enough heard. The old fear moved through me like cold air under a door. I could have laughed it off. I could have said we were friends. I could have protected Elodie from a question her own honesty had not yet invited. Before I answered, Elodie crossed the gallery. Not quickly, not dramatically. She did not rush like someone interrupting scandal. She walked with the same grace that had always made people move aside for her, but this time she was not using it to escape. She came to stand beside me in front of my work, close enough that her sleeve brushed mine. "Rowan and I are close," she said. Her mother's expression did not change. "I see." Elodie's fingers curled once, then relaxed. "I'm in love with her." The gallery did not explode. No one gasped theatrically. A trustee blinked too many times. Tessa went pale with anger or embarrassment. Marwick's face became unreadable in the way powerful women use when deciding whether a moment is useful. My own body felt oddly quiet, as if the declaration had happened at a distance and would reach me later. Vivian Calder looked at her daughter for a long, precise moment. "This is hardly the setting." "No," Elodie said. "The proper setting would have been any of the moments when I let her stand alone, because I was afraid of this conversation." Something shifted in her voice on the last words. It did not become grand. It became true. Her mother's mouth tightened. "You are making a private matter unnecessarily public." "I made it public when I denied her." Elodie turned slightly, including the room not as audience, but as witnesses she had avoided too long. 2 weeks ago, in Marwick's workshop, Rowan asked to partner with me, and I pretended I barely knew her. I did that because I was afraid of gossip, of disappointing you, of losing a version of myself that never made room for the person I actually am. I humiliated her to protect my comfort. That was cruel. It was also cowardly. No one spoke. Even the dead shipping men seemed to be listening. Elodie looked at me then, and for once, the look was not the point. The choice had already been made before her eyes found mine. "I'm not saying this so you'll forgive me tonight. I'm saying it because whether you forgive me or not, I won't build another room where you have to disappear." My repaired gloves were still on my hands. I felt the mended seam against my left finger, the tiny ridge where she had sat with needle and thread and fixed what she could fix without pretending wool was skin or trust. Vivian said, "Elodie, we will discuss this elsewhere." Elodie nodded. "Yes, we will, but not by pretending Rowan is an unfortunate rumor." The cost landed visibly then. Tessa stepped back. June looked away. A trustee whispered to another. Vivian's face closed into a polite severity that promised future consequences. Elodie did not move away from me. Marwick cleared her throat. "Miss Hale's work deserves the attention of the room. I suggest we return to it." I almost laughed from the shock of being returned to my own career after becoming part of someone else's family rupture. But Marwick asked me another question about fastenings, and I answered because my work was still mine. Elodie stayed beside me for 1 minute, then stepped back to let the conversation center on the garments. That mattered too. She had not used my work as stage and then swallowed it. She had made her confession and allowed me to remain the artist in the room. Later, I found her outside on the terrace, coat unbuttoned despite the cold. Snow collected along the stone railing. Below us, the garden lamps turned the paths gold. "I didn't know your mother would ask that," she said before I could speak. "I know. I should have told her before tonight. Yes. She's furious." I guessed. Elodie gave a small, broken laugh. "I may lose the Calder Fellowship recommendation. Will you? Maybe. Maybe not. She likes leverage too much to waste it quickly." I joined her at the railing, leaving a careful space. "Are you telling me because you want comfort, or because you want me to know what it cost?" She looked at me, startled, then considered the question instead of reacting to it. "The second, and maybe a little of the first, but I know I don't have the right to ask." "You can ask," I said. "I can say no." Her eyes softened. "That is new for us." "It needs to be." "I know." She looked down at her hands. No gloves. Of course. She had probably left them somewhere in the rush of choosing courage. "When Hana asked you out, I was jealous. But after you spoke to me in the corridor, I realized the jealousy was easier than shame. If I focused on her, I didn't have to look at what I had made you feel. And now? Now I'm still jealous," she admitted. "But I'm more afraid that I taught you not to trust happiness when it came from me." I rested my forearms on the cold stone. "You did damage that wanting me can't repair." "I know. I went with Hana tonight." Her face tightened, but she stayed quiet. She was kind. Honest. She asked for nothing I couldn't give. and I told her I couldn't offer romance. Elodie closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, she did not look triumphant. Relief was there, yes, but so was restraint. Thank you for telling me. I'm not telling you as reassurance. I'm telling you because I want to be honest even when honesty gives you something. That's more than I gave you. Yes. She accepted that without flinching. The snow thickened. Inside, the reception continued with the soft clink of money pretending to be culture. What happens now? She asked. I don't know. Can I try? At what? At being in your life without hiding you, without assuming your forgiveness is the prize at the end of my improvement, she swallowed. At being your friend again first, if that is all you can offer. At earning whatever comes after by not deciding what you should feel. I looked at her bare hands. They were reddening in the cold. Once, I would have immediately taken my gloves off and given them to her. I would have mistaken sacrifice for intimacy. Instead, I said, "You should go inside before your fingers freeze." Her smile was tiny and sad. That was almost tender. It was practical. I'll take practical. But she did not move. After a moment, I pulled one glove off, held it by the fingertips and offered it. One, I'm keeping the other. She stared at it, then at me. Shared custody. Temporary, weather-based mercy. She took the glove carefully, like it might vanish if she made the wrong joke. Her fingers brushed mine, only because the wool passed between us. She put it on her right hand. It looked absurdly small on her, and for the first time all night, I smiled. There, I said. Now we are both equally underprepared. Elodie breathed out. That might be the most romantic thing anyone has ever said to me. Your standards are damaged. I'm aware. We stood there with one glove each until the cold finally drove us inside. The aftermath did not become simple. I appreciated that later, though at the time I resented every complicated hour. Elodie did speak to her mother. I knew because she told me afterward in the conservatory, where the citrus trees smelled too bright for winter. She did not report every wound, only the facts that mattered. Vivian had called the relationship impulsive, professionally unwise, socially distracting. Elodie had said it was none of those things, and even if it became inconvenient, she would not trade honesty for ease. The fellowship recommendation remained uncertain. Elodie said this with a tight mouth, but no visible regret. Tessa stopped inviting her to certain gatherings. June, to her credit, apologized to me for laughing in the critique room after Elodie denied knowing me. It wasn't funny, she said, twisting her bracelet. It was just easier to act like it was. I accepted the apology because it cost me little and seemed to cost her enough. Claire asked whether she could write about the ethics of public intimacy in closed creative environments, and I told her if she used my life as material, I would replace her laptop keys in alphabetical order. She believed me. Hana became my friend in the exact way she had promised. We tested lighting gels for my final presentation. She complained beautifully. She never made me feel guilty for not wanting more. Once when Elodie entered the black box studio and saw us laughing over a failed projection, jealousy crossed her face and left without becoming my responsibility. She greeted Hana politely. Hana greeted her with the serene menace of a woman who respected growth but kept receipts. Elodie and I began again awkwardly. Not with kisses. Not at first. She walked me to the archive and did not take my hand. She sat beside me at dinner and introduced me to a donor as the designer whose work I told you about, then glanced at me afterward, not for praise but to make sure the wording had not turned me into an accessory. She asked, before coming to my room. Sometimes I said no because I was tired, or because I wanted to remember I could. She accepted it. The first time she did, I cried after closing the door, not from sadness, but from the strange grief of receiving respect later than I had needed it. 2 weeks before the final showcase, my central prototype failed during a movement test. The magnetic seam at the left shoulder released too easily, sending the outer panel sliding down the model's arm in front of Dr. Sayeg, Marwick, and half the technical crew. It was not catastrophic, but it was public enough to sting. I knelt to gather the fallen panel, already calculating replacements, when Tessa muttered from the benches, "Maybe accessibility is just another word for unfinished." The old Rowan might have absorbed it. The newer one stood. "It is a word for bodies design has ignored," I said, holding the panel against my chest. My voice was even. "If you are confused, I can recommend readings." A few people laughed. Not cruelly this time. Tessa flushed. Elodie had been across the studio consulting with the lighting team. She turned at the sound, took in my face, Tessa's expression, the fallen panel, and walked over. I braced myself for defense, for the kind of rescue that would make me look smaller. Instead, she addressed Dr. Sayegh. "The release tension can be recalibrated by changing the magnet spacing. Rowan predicted this might happen under rotational stress. It's in her notes." Dr. Sayegh looked at me. "Is it?" "Yes," I said, surprised. "Then test the alternate spacing." Elodie did not look at Tessa. She did not dramatize loyalty. She helped me retrieve the measuring tape and then stepped back so I could lead the adjustment. Later, when we were alone at the work table, I said, "Thank you for not turning that into a duel. I considered it." "I know. I thought you'd prefer evidence to bloodshed." "I did," she smiled faintly. "I'm learning your values." "You knew my values." "I knew many things about you privately," she said. "I didn't always honor them publicly." That was the difference. She no longer rushed past the wound in order to enjoy the repair. The night before the final showcase, Bellamy House lost power in the East Wing. Emergency lamps glowed red along the corridors. Residents wandered with flashlights and accusations. My room went cold within an hour, and I relocated to the main studio with 3 blankets, my laptop, and the final garment pieces sealed in muslin bags. Around midnight, Elodie appeared carrying a thermos and 2 pairs of gloves. "Before you accuse me of theft," she said, "these are both mine." I looked up from stitching a label. "Disappointing. Your criminal era had charm." Her smile warmed the edges of her tired face. "I brought options." She placed a pair of black wool gloves on the table and a pair of ridiculous red mittens beside them. The mittens had tiny embroidered foxes. I stared. "Absolutely not. They were a gift from my aunt." "Your aunt hates you. She thinks I'm whimsical." "Is she aware of your personality?" Elodie laughed softly and sat across from me. The studio was mostly empty, the power outage having driven sanier people to bed. Emergency light turned the windows, dark and reflective. "You're nervous," she said. "Yes. Do you want advice, distraction, or quiet company?" The question slipped under my defenses. Once she would have chosen for me. She would have assumed her presence was comfort, because I loved her. Now she offered categories like tools, and let me select. "Quiet company," I said. "Maybe distraction in 20 minutes. She nodded, pulled on the fox mittens with grave dignity, and opened her own notebook. 20 minutes became an hour. We worked without touching. The distance between us felt alive, but not hungry. At some point, I looked over and found her sketching not designs, but hands. Mine holding shears, mine smoothing seams, mine missing one glove on the terrace. When she noticed me looking, she did not snap the notebook shut. "You draw hands when you're worried," I said. "I draw yours when I want to remember to be careful." The words could have been too much. They were saved by how quietly she said them. I put down my needle. "Elodie," she looked up. "I miss you." Her face changed so openly that I had to look away for a second. "I miss you too. I'm still angry. I know. I still don't know exactly what we become after all this." "I can live with not knowing," she said. "I couldn't before. I kept trying to force the future into a shape I could manage. It made me selfish." The emergency lights hummed. Somewhere below, someone cursed at a fuse box. I reached across the table and tugged lightly at one of her fox mittens. "Come here." She stood slowly, giving me time to change my mind. I did not. When she came around the table, I turned my chair toward her. She knelt in front of me, not dramatically, just because it put us at the same height while I sat. I took her mittened hand and pressed it between both of mine. "I don't want to go back," I said. "Neither do I. I don't want secret rooms and public strangers. I won't ask that of you again. And I don't want you to think every public gesture fixes something. I'm learning that the gesture only matters if the daily behavior changes after it." I nodded. "Good." She huffed a tiny, nervous laugh. That sounded like Dr. Sayegh. I contain multitudes. You do. The affection in her voice almost broke me. I touched her cheek, gently enough that she could refuse by turning away. She did not. Her eyes closed. The first kiss after distance was not cinematic. It was brief, careful, almost questioning. She kissed me like someone asking to enter a house she had once damaged. I kissed her back because wanting had survived, but I stopped first, because survival was not the same as surrender. She rested her forehead against my knee. Thank you. For what? For letting me earn the next question. I looked at her bowed head, the absurd mittens. The woman who had once hidden me and was now kneeling under emergency lights, asking with her whole posture not to be forgiven too quickly. You can ask it. She lifted her face. Would you let me stand with you tomorrow? Not in front of you, not as announcement. Just beside you, if you want me there. My throat ached. Yes. The power returned at 2 a.m. The lights came back all at once, too bright and ordinary, revealing thread scraps, empty cups, and Elodie's fox mittens still in my lap. The final showcase filled Bellamy House with polished shoes, expensive coats, and the restless hunger of people pretending art was not also commerce. My garments occupied the central platform in the South Gallery. Dancers from the city conservatory wore them in slow demonstrations, bending, reaching, fastening, and unfastening seams with deliberate clarity. I stood nearby, answering questions until my voice went rough. Dr. Sayegh watched from a corner, severe and proud. Hana adjusted lighting cues with terrifying competence. Miko's paper harness installation floated above the stairwell like a flock of disciplined ghosts. Elodie stood beside me when I asked her to, and moved away when the work required space. She introduced me accurately. She corrected one donor who assumed she had collaborated on the garments. No, she said. This is Rowan's work. I was lucky enough to watch it grow. She said it easily, without making humility another performance. Vivienne Calder arrived halfway through the evening. I saw Elodie notice her and steady herself without reaching for me as a shield. Mother and daughter spoke near the archway. I could not hear much, only fragments. Future. Unnecessary difficulty. Your choice. Elodie's face remained pale but calm. When she returned, she did not report the conversation immediately. She waited until my current group of visitors had moved on. My mother withdrew the private recommendation for the Calder Fellowship, she said. I went still. Elodie. I expected it. Her mouth trembled once, then steadied. Marwick told me to apply through the open pool anyway. I'm sorry. I'm angry, she admitted. And sad. And weirdly relieved that the threat is no longer imaginary. She looked toward her mother, then back at me. I don't regret telling the truth. I believed her. Not because she said it beautifully, but because she looked wounded and free at the same time. Before I could answer, Marwick approached with 2 trustees and a woman from a major design foundation. My work demanded me again. Elodie stepped aside but not away. I spoke until the old fear receded beneath the steadier rhythm of knowledge. When the foundation woman asked whether I had considered developing the closures for commercial use, I said yes, and for once I did not shrink from the scale of my own ambition. By the end of the night, my feet hurt, my face ached from smiling, and Dr. Sayegh informed me that Marwick wanted to discuss a museum-supported research grant. I should have been dizzy with joy. Instead, I felt grounded, as if the night had placed weight beneath me instead of lifting me away. Near midnight, after the last donor left and residents began dismantling the temporary displays, Elodie found me in the cloakroom, wrestling with a garment bag. She held up my charcoal gloves. You left these by the platform. I narrowed my eyes. Did I? You did. Or did you steal them again for nostalgia? Her smile appeared slowly, not the old smirk exactly. Softer, more careful, still entirely dangerous to my peace. I considered it, she said, but theft feels like a step backward. Personal growth is tragic. Devastating. She offered the gloves on both palms. May I? I let her slide them onto my hands. The gesture was public enough. The cloakroom door stood open, residents passed carrying crates. Hana shouted something about cables down the hall. Elodie did not step away when people went by. She fastened the loose button at my wrist, the one she had repaired weeks ago, and looked at me with the quiet concentration she used when the world no longer got to edit her tenderness. "You were brilliant tonight," she said. "I know." Her eyebrows rose. "You do. I'm practicing. I like it. I thought you might." She laughed, and because the door was open, people heard. No one combusted. No dynasty fell in that exact second. A few glances slid over us and moved on. Ordinary public affection turned out to be less like standing beneath a spotlight and more like opening a window. Elodie's fingers rested lightly against my gloved palm. "Can I walk you home?" Bellamy House was technically our home for another week, but I understood the question beneath the question. Could she leave with me through the front door? Could she be seen? Could she remain herself while choosing me where coats were being collected, and goodbyes shouted and the night had witnesses? "Yes," I said, "but I'm carrying my own garment bag." "I would never insult your strength." "You tried to steal my gloves." I said I'm growing, not cured. We stepped outside together. Snow had stopped. The garden paths glittered with frozen edges under the lamps. Elodie reached for my hand, then paused, asking without words. I turned my palm up. She laced our fingers together, glove against glove, warm through wool. For a while we walked without needing to fill the cold with explanation. The final showcase glowed behind us, all glass and noise and the strange temporary magic of a place that had hurt us and changed us and would soon release us. At the gate, Elodie tugged gently on my hand. "Rowan." "Yes?" "That morning by the North Studio when I stole your gloves? I remember. I wanted you to chase me because I liked knowing you would." I looked at her. The honesty was small, but it mattered. "I know. I don't want to be loved like a dare anymore." "What do you want?" she thought before answering. To ask, to be answered, to stay when the answer is not easy. The cold touched my cheeks. My gloves were mine, repaired and returned. Her hand held mine without hiding. Behind us, the house door opened and laughter spilled out. But she did not let go. "Then ask," I said. Elodie's smile trembled at the edges. "Can I kiss you good night?" It was not our first kiss. It felt like the first one that belonged wholly to us. "Yes," I said. She kissed me beneath the winter-dark archway with the gentleness of someone who understood that being allowed close was not the same as being owed closeness. There was no thunder, no dramatic music, no perfect ending wrapped in certainty. There was only her gloved hand in mine, the cold air around us, and the open gate ahead. When we pulled apart, she did not look around to see who had seen. She looked at me. I squeezed her fingers once. "You can keep your own gloves, by the way." She laughed against my cheek. "Generous. I'm known for mercy. You're known for threatening laptop keys. Also mercy." We walked through the gate together, neither of us rushing, neither of us hiding, our joined hands swinging lightly between us like something ordinary and hard-won, and for the first time all winter, I did not wonder whether she would drop my hand when the path grew brighter. The week after the showcase should have felt like an ending, but endings in real life were always messier than the stories people preferred to tell at receptions. Bellamy House began to empty slowly. Work tables lost their towers of muslin. Labels were peeled from shelves. The kitchen filled with abandoned spices, half-empty jars, and residents bargaining over who wanted extra rice, spare thread, or a plant no one remembered buying. Success did not make packing easier. It only made every object seem like proof that the last 6 weeks had actually happened. Elodie and I did not become effortless. I was grateful for that too, eventually. Effortless would have frightened me, because effortless was what secrecy had pretended to be. Instead, we practiced the small, difficult things. When she reached for my hand in the hall and I stiffened because Tessa was coming down the stairs, Elodie did not drop it, but she did loosen her grip enough for me to choose whether to stay. I stayed. Tessa passed us with her mouth pinched around a comment she did not quite dare to make, and afterward, Elodie did not ask whether I was proud of her. She squeezed my fingers once and asked whether I wanted breakfast. When I received Marwick's formal invitation to apply for the research grant, My first urge was to run to Elodie's room. My second was to sit alone with the news, until it belonged to me before anyone else reflected it back. I chose the second. An hour later, I found Elodie in the library cataloging photographs of her installation and told her. She stood too fast, knocked her knee against the table, and then stopped herself from pulling me into an embrace without asking. The restraint made me laugh. "You may celebrate," I said. "Verbally or physically?" "Start verbally. I'll review performance." "You are brilliant," she said immediately. "Marwick has taste. The grant board would be lucky to attach its name to your work. I am insufferably proud, and trying very hard not to make a noise. Only dogs can hear." "Approved," I said, and opened my arms. She came into them carefully at first, then with the full relief of someone allowed to be happy without hiding it. Miko looked up from the next table, saw us, and said, "Finally." The architectural tension in this room was becoming unsafe. Hana, who had been rewiring a lamp by the window, added, "I object to happiness unless it is properly lit." Then she turned the lamp toward us, with a flourish so absurd that I laughed into Elodie's shoulder. That was how it changed, not in one grand moment, but in rooms where people learned the truth and the ceiling remained intact. Elodie did not become less admired. She became more specific. Some people admired her less when they understood she could be frightened and wrong. Some admired her more. Neither reaction controlled the shape of us, as much as she had once believed. Elodie Calder sent me a message 2 days before departure. It arrived through the official residency email system, which made it feel both formal and faintly threatening. She requested a conversation in the South Gallery at 4. I showed Elodie the message because secrecy no longer felt noble, but I did not ask permission. "I can come with you," Elodie said. "I know." "Do you want me to?" "No, I want to go alone and tell you afterward." Her hand tightened around her pen, then relaxed. "All right." Vivian was waiting beside the empty platform where my garments had been displayed. Without the lights and dancers, the gallery looked larger and colder. She wore gray that day, and for the first time I could see the resemblance to Elodie not in beauty, but in control. They both held themselves as if posture could negotiate with weather. "Miss Hale," she said. "Mrs. Calder, I owe you an apology." Of all the things I had prepared for, that was not one of them. I kept my expression neutral because I had learned from the best. "Do you?" "For making you feel as though you were an embarrassment to be managed." The wording was careful, possibly rehearsed, but not meaningless. I waited. "My daughter has informed me," Vivian continued, with unusual persistence, "that my approval is not the same as morality." That sounds like her. She was less polite. That also sounds like her. Vivian's mouth moved, almost but not quite a smile. "I will not pretend I understand every choice she's making. I will also not pretend my discomfort gives me the right to turn you into a test of her seriousness. You're not an unfortunate rumor, Miss Hale. You are a gifted artist. You deserved better manners from me." The apology did not heal everything. It did not need to. It marked a door where before there had been a wall. "Thank you," I said. "I appreciate you saying that." "She cares for you." "I know." "She has cared for very few people without trying to control the terms." "I know that too." Vivian looked toward the high windows. "If you hurt her, I imagine I will dislike you intensely." I should have been offended. Instead, I found the honesty almost refreshing. If she hurts me the same way again, I imagine I'll dislike her intensely. This time Vivian did smile, small and reluctant. "Fair." When I told Elodie afterward, she sat on the edge of my bed and put her face in both hands. "She apologized to you before she apologized properly to me." "Of course she did. That woman could turn emotional growth into a power move." I sat beside her. "She tried." "Did she scare you?" "A little." "I'm sorry. I didn't say I was helpless." Elodie looked up at once. "No, you didn't." That was another change. She no longer confused my fear with fragility. She no longer tried to rush in and rewrite every difficult thing into safety. Sometimes she sat beside me while I held my own ground, and that became its own kind of intimacy. On the last morning, snow melted from the roof in silver threads. The courtyard where she had stolen my gloves looked almost ordinary, stripped of frost and drama. residents carried cases to waiting cars. Dr. Sayed gave me a hug so brief and startling that Miko dropped a box of paper samples. Hana promised to visit my future studio and threaten any lighting that failed me. She hugged Elodie too, after a pause just long enough to make them both aware it was a diplomatic event. "Take care of her," Hana said. Elodie answered, "I'm learning to take care with her." Hana's eyes warmed. "Better." My train did not leave until evening, and Elodie had arranged a car for noon because her mother had summoned her to a family lunch that sounded like a legal proceeding with better silverware. We stood near the North Studio steps after everyone else drifted away. My suitcase waited by the gate. Her car waited beyond it. Neither of us seemed eager to move first. "I hate that I'm leaving before you," she said. "You'll survive 4 hours without supervising me." "Unclear." I smiled. The old joke returned easily, but it did not erase what had changed. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out the green leather gloves she had once left at my door in place of an apology. I had never worn them. I had never known what to do with them. Now she held them out. Not as a gift, not as payment, but as a question. "I bought these because I wanted to fix pain without standing in it," she said. "You don't have to keep them. But I thought maybe they could become something else, if you wanted." I took them. The leather was softer than my old wool, impractical for studio work, perfect for a version of me who did not choose only what was useful. Something else like what? Like proof that I can give you beautiful things without asking them to speak for me. I looked at her, at the woman who had smirked over stolen gloves, and then learned the cost of turning love into a dare. "I'll keep them." Her relief was visible, but she did not reach for it too greedily. "Good. I'm still keeping the old ones. I would never compete with a textile of such historic importance. They have survived you twice. They deserve a plaque." A driver called her name from the gate. Elodie ignored it for 1 second, then glanced at me. "May I kiss you goodbye?" The question still mattered. I hoped it always would. "Yes." She kissed me in the courtyard where she had once stepped away. This time there were witnesses. A driver checking his watch, Miko pretending to organize fallen paper for the 3rd time, Hana standing near the van with a cable bag over her shoulder and a satisfied expression. Elodie kissed me softly and briefly, not to prove anything to them, but without subtracting them from the world. When she pulled back, she brushed her thumb over the edge of the green gloves in my hands. "Text me when you get to the station." "Yes, not because I'm managing you. I know. Because I'll miss you. I know that too." She laughed under her breath, kissed my cheek once, and finally walked to the car. At the door, she looked back. Months earlier, I would have searched her face for signs of hesitation, for the exact moment she might turn public again and leave private tenderness behind. This time she lifted her hand, bare despite the cold, and smiled at me in full view of everyone. I put on the green gloves, after her car disappeared through the gate. They fit beautifully. They would be terrible for cutting fabric and useless near dye, but I flexed my fingers inside them and allowed myself to enjoy something made only to be soft. Then I picked up my suitcase, walked down the steps alone, and found that alone no longer meant unwanted. At the train station that evening, I stood beneath the departure board with my old wool gloves tucked safely in my bag and the green ones on my hands. My phone buzzed. Elodie had sent a photo from her family lunch, one place card beside another, her hand resting on the table in full view. The empty chair next to her saved beneath my name, though I was miles away. Under it she had written, "Not hiding, just waiting." I smiled so hard the woman beside me glanced over, then smiled too without knowing why. The train arrived in a rush of wind. I stepped onto it carrying my suitcase, my work, my fear, my ambition, and a love that no longer needed darkness to feel real. Through the glass, the platform lights blurred into long gold lines. I held both gloved hands in my lap and watched the city begin to move. Brighter now, because nothing in me was being asked to disappear.